Lena had always been the type to fill her days with tasks, responsibilities, and deadlines. As a second-year university student, life was a constant juggling act of lectures, assignments, and part-time work. She never felt like there was enough time for everything she wanted to do. The idea of spare time was foreign to her. Whenever she did manage to carve out a few free hours, they were often spent thinking about everything she should be doing instead. So, when she woke up on a Saturday morning to find that her weekend was unexpectedly free, no homework, no work shifts, no meetings, she felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. At first, she didn't know what to do with herself. It felt wrong to have nothing pressing on her schedule. Her mind raced with the usual thoughts: should I catch up on reading? Is there something I'm forgetting? But then, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply breathe. Lena rolled out of bed and stretched, looking out the window. The sky was clear, the sun shining brightly over the sleepy campus. The kind of weather that made her want to be outside, but, somehow, she often kept herself indoors, buried under a pile of textbooks. Today, she wasn't going to let herself fall into that pattern. She grabbed her favorite sweater, slipped on her sneakers, and headed out the door. Her first stop was the local park, a small green space she had passed by countless times but never visited. As she walked through the entrance, she was immediately struck by the peace that seemed to envelop her. The air was fresh, the sound of birds chirping filling the background. The park was mostly empty, just a few joggers and a couple of families with small children. Lena found an empty bench near a pond and sat down. For a few minutes, she just sat there, letting the silence wash over her. The idea of doing nothing felt odd at first. She kept reaching for her phone, instinctively scrolling through social media, but after a few failed attempts to distract herself, she realized how exhausting that had become. Instead, she looked around, noticing the little details she usually ignored: the ripples in the pond, the soft rustling of leaves in the trees, the laughter of the children playing nearby. She closed her eyes and listened to the world happening around her, realizing just how often she took these small moments for granted. Eventually, Lena pulled out her notebook and started jotting down her thoughts. She had always enjoyed writing, but between her packed schedule and the constant pressure of deadlines, she hadn't taken the time to do it. Today felt different. She wrote about the park, about the way the sun felt warm on her skin and the breeze was just strong enough to ruffle her hair. The words flowed easily, as if the simple act of slowing down had unlocked something inside her. As she filled the pages with reflections, a small smile crept across her face. She hadn't realized how much she missed writing for herself, not for a grade or a project, but simply because it felt good. She felt a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was strange how something so simple could feel so nourishing. The next few hours passed quickly. Lena wandered around the park, stopping to watch an elderly man tending to his garden in a small community plot. She had seen him there before, but never took the time to stop and talk. Today, she did. They chatted about the weather, about the types of flowers he grew, and he even showed her how to plant a small rosebush. She didn't know much about gardening, but there was something meditative about it. Something about tending to life, nurturing growth. It reminded her of how important it was to care for herself, to nurture her own well-being. When she was finished, she felt an unusual sense of satisfaction. Not because she had accomplished something major, but because she had experienced something. She had stepped out of her routine, out of her mind's constant buzz, and just lived in the moment. Later that evening, Lena found herself back at home, still reflecting on her day. Her phone buzzed. Sarah, her best friend, was calling. Lena smiled and picked up. "Hey, Lena, how's your weekend going? What are you up to?" Lena paused, thinking about her day. "It's been nice. Actually, it's been great. I spent the whole afternoon at the park, wrote a little, talked to a gardener about roses, and just slowed down for once." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Wait, you slowed down? The girl who's always too busy for anything?" Lena laughed. "Yeah, I guess I did. It's weird, I didn't feel guilty or stressed. It was just peaceful. I forgot how nice it is to have some spare time and actually use it for myself." "Well, I'm impressed," Sarah replied, her tone warm. "I think you're onto something." We're so used to filling every minute with something productive. But maybe it's okay to take a break sometimes. You've earned it. Lena thought about that. It was true. She had always seen spare time as something to fill with work, something to be used efficiently. But today, she had learned that it didn't have to be about doing anything productive. It could be about simply being. The time didn't have to be filled with anything, its very existence was enough. The next day, Lena woke up with a sense of purpose but also a sense of freedom. She decided to take a different route to the cafe where she often studied. She was tired of always walking the same paths, seeing the same sights. She took a new street, one that led her to a quiet art gallery she had never noticed before. The small space was filled with paintings, sculptures, and photography that seemed to tell stories that resonated with her in a way she hadn't expected. She spent an hour just looking at the pieces, trying to understand the emotions behind each one. It was a simple, quiet way to spend her time, but it felt important. As the day wore on, Lena continued to explore the town in ways she never had before. She wandered through small shops, stumbled upon a farmer's market, and tried a new cafe where she sat by the window and read a book she had borrowed from the library weeks ago but never had the time to start. There was no rush, no pressure to get somewhere or do something. She had the luxury of simply enjoying her day. By the time evening came, Lena felt deeply fulfilled. Not because she had been productive, but because she had given herself the space to relax, explore, and rediscover the joy in simple activities. She realized how much time she had spent running from one thing to the next, always chasing the next deadline, the next task. But in doing so, she had forgotten how to truly appreciate her surroundings. As she sat down at her desk to prepare for the week ahead, Lena smiled to herself. She had discovered something valuable over the weekend, the importance of taking time for herself, of stepping away from the demands of her busy life to simply be. Spare time was no longer something she feared or resented. It was a gift, one that she would cherish and use wisely from now on.